Well, welcome everybody to episode 14 of the Community Cloudcast. I'm your host, Eric Schups. My other hosts, Jason Himmelstein and Paul McCollum, may or may not be with us today. Hopefully they can join us later. But I'm also joined by our special guest this month, Mr. Michael Noel. Michael, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you again, Eric.
Good, good. Well, we'll do a little bit more of an intro here in a moment, but I just want to remind folks that new episodes come out every third Thursday of every month, content willing, and that we have speakers that are willing to join us. You can hit us on our YouTube channel, link there on the slide, or on Facebook. We'll be streaming across both platforms. If you have questions, please post them onto those separate channels. We will route them back to the speakers so that they can respond appropriately or ignore you if your question is just silly nonsense. So Michael Noel is joining us this month. Now, Michael and I have known each other for, good Lord, I couldn't even tell, Michael. It's been years and years and years and years. Funnily enough, Michael is one of my friends that I rarely see in America and that I always see somewhere else in the world.
This is true. I don't actually think. No, maybe I have seen you at least once, maybe a tech ed or something years ago.
SharePoint conference in the years
SharePoint,
back.
yeah, Vegas occasionally, yeah, back when they would have the SharePoint conferences there. But yeah, but primarily I'm seeing you in Europe or somewhere else. So
yeah, usually the case. Now Michael is a bit more of a braver traveler than I am. He goes to lots of places around the world. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you have a list of all the countries that you visit and you're trying to tick them all off. Just give me a taste. Where are some of the strangest places you've ever gone to?
Wow. It's an interesting list because, of course, you've got places where the culture is very different, right? Where you feel like you're really in a different planet. Culturally, at least, those would be places like a lot of the places have been walled off for a while, like Bhutan. It feels like you're somewhere else, like a different planet. There are other places in Africa that have very different cultures. Like Mauritania. It was a really interesting place. I'm not sure I'd necessarily go back. But I enjoy traveling everywhere at least once. My plan is to at least go to every country once. And as you said, there is a list. I mean, it depends on how you define a country when we start to talk about this. But if you're just talking UN member nations, voting member nations, that's 193 countries, and I've been to 183 at this point. So I've got 10 left.
Wow,
10 left, and crossing fingers, visas, things like that. Regional instability aside, I hope to kind of do those final 10 within the next 6 months or so. So,
amazing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I enjoy it.
Funnily enough, you always seem to be having a good time where you go. Everyone accepts you, and
yeah, there you have moments. I was just talking with a joint friend of ours, Joel Olison, about one of our trips where we were just we were having trouble with one of the drivers, and this was in Burkina Faso, and it was challenging because of course he spoke very little English, and my franglais is not so good, so so we're trying to communicate things across. He's trying to shake us down as much as possible. He wasn't going to take us to the border, even though he said he was going to take us to the border. And yeah, I may have lost my cool, and I may have punched the dash on his taxi and put like a fist into the. I mean, I don't usually lose my cool, but I did that time. And so there are some moments like that where things kind of go off rails a little bit, but at the same time, that same trip, like after we got rid of this terrible taxi driver, we met this guy, James Brown. No kidding, that's his name. And he's the son of a tribal elder up in the Pays d'Argent, which is this rift valley where there's no electricity, no cell phones, no roads, no vehicles. The only vehicles they have are camel carts and donkey carts, basically. So you go up this rift valley, and you're just going from village to village, and they're animist. A good percentage of them are still animists, and they bury they bury bodies up on the cliffside, so you actually will see like bones up there. And
oh, wow.
I mean, it's just it was the rest of the trip was fantastic. So you just got to sometimes put up with an errant cab driver, and then you get the reward eventually. And I do love it. It's something in the genes. It's that Wanderlust thing or something. I just always want to travel, which of course the past couple of years has been a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, that has been difficult.
Yeah.
I have to admit, compared to you, I don't travel much at all. But compared to most of my other friends, I do travel a lot.
Yeah,
and
you did
that
the
being
UK.
stuck at home was just bizarre. Just
Yeah,
weird.
yeah. It's I'm I'm hoping to make up for lost time. I was, kind of planning to have finished all these countries. I think it was supposed to be September of 2020, and we know how that all ended up. So,
Mm.
but yeah, it's again kind of getting back to normal. Traveling in COVID times, which I did over a couple times earlier this year. That has its own set of challenges, and you've got to test. You have to do test after test after test when you're going between these countries, and you could get you could be forced to quarantine. I know a guy who got quarantined in Juba, South Sudan, for 14 days in a hotel.
Boy.
Not the place you want to quarantine.
Wow.
So there's always that risk, you've got to
Yeah.
kind of plan for that. You tell your wife, oh gee, guess what, I might get stuck there because if you get COVID and they're just not going to let you out. So yeah, it's a challenge, but at least there's less of that, because coming back to the US, you had to get your test, and that was always challenging. So at least now that's no longer in case. So, but crossing fingers, everything is okay. I actually even personally got finally broke my streak and got COVID a couple months ago, and yeah, it was not fun, but got through it. Only one other person in the family got it, so crossing fingers.
And thankfully you were at home.
Yeah, it was the timing. If you're going to time your COVID the right way, that was good timing. It was like a 2-week or 2-month period of time in which I wasn't planning on traveling. So I was like, okay, well, bring it on, BA5 or whatever the heck I just got here. So yeah,
that flavor of the month, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what's the latest now, BA10 or.
Well, we wanted to. There'll be a new one next month.
Yeah, no,
just stick around. Wait for the next one. So, of course, we want to thank our sponsors for allowing us to do this. We wouldn't be able to do these things and travel and do conferences and all that without customers and sponsors. So we at least want to thank our sponsors, and Aptogen being the primary sponsor of this Cloudcast. We have actually a pretty big announcement coming on September 1st. So, Michael, you'll appreciate this. I've spent the last few months having to rip and replace our middleware layer for all of our APIs because the vendor decided they were going to sunset their current cloud offering. Sometimes we'll just go off on a tangent here, but sometimes, we get really frustrated with Microsoft sometimes. And Michael and I both mostly work with Microsoft. And we get frustrated with them a lot of times, but then you go off the reservation, you realize the grass isn't always greener because the vendor that we've been working with is stuck in the 80s. They have a cloud offering, but man, wow, does it make Azure and AWS look good?
Oh yeah. And there's some of those dodgy cloud offerings that are out there. You're right. I mean, we try to keep Microsoft honest, and like you said, there's always challenges with them. But yeah, I've been there as well too, where you look at some of these other ones, you go, how did you guys even get off the ground with this?
Yeah, when the answer to a public cloud offering is no, just do the hosted on-prem version and just put it in Azure yourself. That's not really an answer for me. So anyway, we've been working hard on that. We've got a whole slew of new stuff coming, announcing on September 1st. So pay attention to our Aptogen channels for that new stuff coming. But what I'm really excited about, both Michael and I are excited about, is the European Cloud Summit coming in Mainz in just outside of Frankfurt, Germany, just over the river, 26th or 28th of September. This is, of course, the sort of sister conference, if you will, to the European Collaboration Summit, same crew, Addison, Spence. And if you want to know more about how those conferences run and how they work, if you go back to, I think last year around this time, maybe it was September, October last year, we did a Cloudcast with them. But this is such a great conference because it's a community conference. And a lot of what Michael and I do are community-based stuff. I mean, I can't imagine some of the events you've done where maybe 5 or 10 people showed up in some far-flung corner of the earth.
I'm doing Kinshasa coming up too. So, because I do try to reach communities that aren't as well served by some of these larger events. But yeah, I mean, certainly the Cloud Summit, yeah, this community event, these guys are not doing this for profit, and they spend so much time working on putting together what's really a world-class event. It's phenomenal how well it run that event is. And it's hard to run events. It's really hard to run events. If you've ever tried, I did one SharePoint Saturday back in the day, and I never want to do that again.
So. Yeah. People ask me all the time, how come we don't have them in Dallas anymore? It's because I did 3 of them and I learned my lesson.
Exactly. And those are, that's relatively small. These guys are putting together, it's a lot of logistics that go into these things, and but they do a fantastic job. It's a really, really good community event. And we were, right before we started recording, we were talking about the fact that price it out. It may be cheaper for you to fly to Frankfurt than it is for you to fly somewhere domestically. And for whatever reason, that's the case. I've been getting pretty decent ticket prices to Europe, as opposed to when I try to fly domestically, like I went to go visit family, and it cost me more than my European ticket did. So
yeah, it's prices are all over the map at the moment. But the good news is you can get to Frankfurt from pretty much anywhere in the States. There's direct flights from most of the major hubs. It's a quick train ride down to Mainz, and so beautiful. It's just an amazing part of the country there, right on the river. And there's lots of great history and stories there. If you're a history buff, the stories from the Second World War are just amazing. In and around there, the beautiful church that they have right in the middle of town.
Yeah, you saw the bridge too, right? You've still got the pylon or whatever for the bridge that the U.S. is the only bridge they didn't blow up, and so we were able to get across the river, on the way over to Berlin during World War II. So yeah, that's right there. That's right near the not far from the conference venue.
Yeah, and which is right on the river itself, the conference is. So it really is amazing, and it's definitely worth a trip to check out. All the things are mostly back to normal for travel restrictions and whatnot. If you want to test and all that, of course, you're welcome to do that. And if you want to wear masks, wear your mask. Nobody's going to give you grief for that. But it's a great event. There'll be a couple thousand people there, really well run, and the content is amazing. I'm really excited for this one because the content's a little different than what we're used to. It's cloud focused, right? It's all about not just Azure though, but there's Google's there and Amazon is there, and it'll be truly a cloud event. And so I'm really excited for this one. I'll be talking about Azure API management there, which I have all sorts of recent war stories to cover now that we've gone through ripping and replacing and putting everything over there. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you're talking about security, which is why I wanted to have you on this month. And I know you do talk about that a lot, but you have a session on security coming up at this event, do you not?
Correct. Yeah, I'm doing a session on cybersecurity. It's been something that over the past 3-4 years I've been doing a lot of work in. I did prior to this. I've always been involved in IT security. In fact, it's a little known thing, but in the 13 years I was an MVP at Microsoft, only 12 of those were for SharePoint. One was for ISA server. Remember ISA server?
Wow.
Yeah. So I wrote one of the only. There was only basically two books on ISA server, and I wrote one of them. I know the guy that wrote the other one. It's a good book too. Don't get me wrong. Tom Schinder is a great guy, but yeah, it was surprising how many copies of that I sold, because this is Microsoft basically creating a firewall. Which a lot of people were like, what? In any case, so I've been involved in IT security for a really long time, and I recently had almost a 2-year stint where I was essentially a functional CISO at one of our clients. So I got really close to doing a lot of the work with a modern IT practice, and basically defending yourselves against all of the threats that are out there. And that's functionally what the session is about. It's talking about your cloud-based IT threats. It's talking about phishing attacks. It's talking about ransomware, cryptojacking. I mean, we go into a lot of detail about. In fact, I usually tell people the first 20 minutes is where I scare you, and then the rest of it make you feel a little bit better, but you still come out of it going, oh my God, I'm doing my passwords the wrong way. I'm thinking wrong about this. I'm not focusing on the right things, because it's there's a lot of really poor practices that are out there today that have just we've kept we've kept going, with those things as IT, and it's leading us into a lot of problem areas where you get organizations that they wake up on a one morning and people try to log into their machines. They find out every domain join system has been crypto locked and ransomware attacked, and you're dusting off your resume at that point. It's bad. I've seen it, and you don't want to be that IT manager that day when that comes down. So yeah.
Well, I have seen that too, and so we're gonna drill into that and get some more insight on that. But let's welcome in my fellow co-host Paul McCollum. Paul, good to see you this month, sir.
Thank you very much. Sorry for being late. I was just on another security briefing as well, so nice merge of topics. And it was the fear factor / how to fix it. Same kind of pattern as Michael was talking about.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be top of mind for you then. So just want to mention one more event coming up in October, the North American Collaboration Summit. Now, since this has been announced, of course, Microsoft has announced Ignite, which will be on the same dates as the NACS, which is always unfortunate for a conference organizer, but they are partnering up a little bit. There'll be some content available to NACS from the Ignite folks. You could do live. They'll do session sharing and whatnot from the event. And Branson I know it can be a little bit hard to get to, but it is a cool place. And the convention center is very nice right there. Mark runs a good show. So if you're in the neighborhood and can make it, it's a easy flight into Springfield and a quick drive down to Branson. Certainly do so. It's October 12th and 14th, and you can get all your Ignite content there as well. Unfortunately, I won't be there this year. I will just be coming back from not only doing the event in Germany, but then we're doing the Bletchley Park Collab Days event in the UK, and Milton Keynes just after that. So I will just be coming back from that. So I won't be heading to Branson, but encourage you to get to that show if you possibly can. Right. So let's take a deep dive, Michael, into the things that you were talking about there. This is obviously a huge topic. We've only got a short period of time, which is probably the biggest problem that you have in trying to present these sessions, is trying to boil all this down into takeaways. So let's start there. What are the things that you try and cover in an hour that will get people pointed at least in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, one of the things is to understand what the threats are. I briefly mentioned spear phishing, and I think what's important is not everybody necessarily understands. First off, they don't necessarily understand what phishing is in general. This is phishing with a PH, by the way. Phishing like this, people may know a little bit more about, but the concept is kind of similar. The hackers are kind of seeing what they can get, right? They're trolling out there and they're seeing who they can catch. Traditional phishing is just basically where they're kind of like you're sending out an email storm out to a whole bunch of people and seeing who's going to click on that link. You've almost surely seen this, or you've probably helped out some relatives that did click on the link or something like that. We've all been there, trying to clean off oh no, you clicked on that link. What are you, crazy? But surprisingly, the hackers are getting more and more sophisticated in how they do this. They're actually sending you stuff at the time that you would expect to get something from, let's say, your bank or from some other location. And then they're also targeting specific people. And this is where the spear phishing comes into place. Spear phishing is, I'm going to look at this organization. I'm going to find who works in the finance department, and I'm going to target that individual themselves with a very specific targeted message. Oftentimes, if you're really good as a hacker, what you do is you first go after the trusted contacts of that person. And once you get a hold of somebody's account there, you use that person's account to send the phishing attack. So you're actually getting, let's say, an email from somebody that you trust. It's a vendor or somebody that you've worked with. And they'll be like, hey, I've got the latest quarterly numbers here. Here's a spreadsheet. Or can you click, we need to click on this link. In any case, it's a lot more sophisticated than the email that you get that has 600 misspellings in it and is just an obvious fake, right? So spear phishing is something you really need to worry about because this is a true story. I almost had my paycheck sent to the wrong place because someone spear phished someone, within this company that I was working with that was owed me a check, and said instead of sending it to this bank, send it to this other bank, and it got right up to the point in which it was almost done, and before I said no, I didn't authorize this, because they checked in to see with me whether it was authorized later on, and they didn't notice that. So they targeted specifically a finance person. They knew that person could make those kind of changes, and again, this stuff happens a lot, and a lot of organizations are not necessarily being open and transparent about when it does happen, because you don't necessarily have to, a spear phishing attack, you don't necessarily have to notify. It's going after one person or a couple different people. You get notified when there's a huge hack or things like that. So keep that in mind. The other thing I talk about is state sponsors of hacking. Essentially, it used to be you have the guy sitting on his mom's couch, and that was the hacker. Think like that South Park episode with the guy sitting there, on the World of Warcraft or whatever. That's what we would think about. And honestly, there were the script kiddies, people trying to see what they could get done. They would call up. It wasn't even hacking, really. They would call up and they would get someone to reset the password or something, social engineering attacks. But what you have now is you have entire countries that set aside a portion of their budget to basically have a whole server farm full of people sitting around, or cubicle farm, of people sitting around and trying to hack. Not just organizations that they don't like, maybe some kind of an NGI or some non-governmental non-governmental organization, but now they're also doing it to basically just raise money in some cases. So countries that are on sanctions lists, they'll go and they'll try to do the ransomware attacks, because then they can use cryptocurrencies and things like that to kind of bypass some of those sanction requirements. So it's a lot harder as an organization to defend yourself when you're defending yourself against entities that are financed to the level in which they're financed. So that's kind of another thing that we'll go into detail in during these sessions.
So nomenclature question. So the obvious fake emails, I've heard that was actually a technique to try and weed out the non-gullible. That if you intentionally do it, you don't get somebody on the hook that's going to figure it out. If it's too smooth, if there's a multi-step process to it, you really want somebody that's, and I'm going to coin the term spoon phishing, because it seems like that's a full-on technique.
That's actually a good term. I think we should put that into the modern lexicon here. You actually have a really good point, and I think in traditional phishing, certainly they don't want to get the guy that knows what they're doing, because they're just going to waste their time. They want the what we call them, simpletons or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I could see that in the case of the spear phishing, when they're going after the guy that should know better, the gal that should know better. That's I think in those cases they tend to try to make it look a lot more sophisticated. It's gotten to the point for me, by the way, where I so rarely click on a link. Right. If it's coming from my bank, if I expect it, I don't care. I'll log in. Don't click on the link. Log into the bank on the website and go into their messaging thing or whatever.
So one other fun modern hack that I've seen, it's hit me twice, so I think it's automated, and I'm pretty sure it was from the same person. So they've either targeted me specifically or I'm just on a list. But when I've changed jobs, when LinkedIn, after a short time after LinkedIn posts a new job for me, I get an email at a formula email address, a guessable email, my first name dot my last name at mycompany.com from the named CIO, CEO of the company as a text message to my phone saying, hey, I'm in a client meeting. Can you send me some eBay gift cards so that I can give to them?
It's always gift cards.
As a new employee, and it's happened twice when I've changed jobs. It came to me one at my current job and one at SenseCorp.
Yeah, you can scrape that data, right?
Yeah,
I mean, if you could easily scrape that data. I could see how logically you would set up that kind of workflow to do that. So it's impressive, but again, it gives you an idea of the resources that they have. These guys are coming up with new ways to kind of scam people, and yeah, I've seen a lot. For multiple reasons, I do get targeted a lot. One of the more recent ones is, I don't know if this happens to you guys, but just engaging with people with fake text messages that are obviously like going to it looks like they're going to the wrong person. So you get a text message and it'll say something like, "Hi, doctor, whatever, my cat is feeling better," or "My cat is not doing so well," or something like that. And so it's a natural response, at least in the past, for someone to go, "This isn't doctor whatever. This is, blah, blah, blah." They're looking to engage with people in that way, and then to kind of lead them down this path to where they eventually ask them for the gift cards or whatever it is that they're doing. So if you suddenly start to get texts that are like that, just block the number that's sending you the text. But yeah, I have gotten onto some kind of a list where I seem to get quite a few of those, maybe at least 2 or 3 a week, from different numbers and things like that. I'm like, man, you guys keep trying, but good luck.
Yeah.
Knock on wood. I mean, you always, we're cybersecurity experts. We know what we're doing, but I still remember that day back in the 90s, looking at that message, the Melissa virus, going, why would I get this? I don't think I should open this attachment. And then seeing the next one come in, and the next one come in, and the next one. And I was actually the Exchange server admin at the organization I was at the time. I grabbed the phone. I called up the manager and said, "Do I have your permission to to unplug the Exchange server?" And he's like, "Yes, do it now." Because I didn't even say why. He knew why. His email. And we actually avoided a lot of the problem, because I just pulled the Ethernet cable out of the back of the server, waited for the churn on the hard drives to like stop, and then they came out with that tool that you could just kind of go in, and it would, by subject line, it would remove all the Melissas, and we ran it against it. So we were actually only down for I think it was 4 or 5 hours, and other people were down for days with Melissa.
I think we were down for a day. We kept ours disconnected for a day while we figured it out. We were running a raw SMTP server, but it was still getting spammed. And then SQL Slammer did the same thing to us. So we went physically unplugged SQL for a couple of days to let that burn through and wait for a patch to come through.
And that's the thing, I mean, who knows what the next one's going to be? Again, they're getting more and more sophisticated. The tools that we have to protect against that, and that's another thing that's covered in my session, is I kind of go through, what's the Microsoft cloud space look like for tools that will help you with this? And this is, Microsoft's Defender suite. This is, things like Defender for Cloud Apps, which, if you've never seen it, is a fantastic tool. Use that at various clients, but basically it will go through and give you a whole bunch of information about, it'll send you alerts, say, oh, this person just uploaded a ton of stuff up to Dropbox. That seems out of the ordinary. Maybe they're stealing data out of your organization. It ties into some of those Azure security alerts where, hey, this person just showed up logging in from country X, and they've never been outside of the States before. So maybe that's, you should look into it.
I think you are the antithesis to that algorithm, though, because
I turn on my I will tell you, this is actually true, because I know I set those alerts off. So whenever I authenticate, I almost always open up my VPN back to my home network, and then I authenticate. So because I know that, because I've had that happen before. People are like, I'm getting alerts from you. You're in Niger or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I'm actually there, but let's just ignore that for now. So yeah, VPN is your way around that. If you don't already have VPNs, get a VPN. There's some really good technologies around there. But yeah, talk about that. Talk about password hygiene. This is one even people that I've known a long time in IT, still are stuck with kind of an old way of thinking. And one of the old things that I'm trying to kill in terms of the idea that people should be changing their passwords like every 3 months or even every 6 months. We need to force them to change their passwords. Okay. This is actually not the best thing, because what ends up happening is people change their passwords. They just increment the number at the end of the password, right? Or what the most common password is right now? It's summer 2022, right? Because every 3 months that person has to change their password. So the next time they have to change it, it's going to be fall 2022, right? So you're forcing people to get into these bad password habits, and the crazy thing is that, like, as humans, we're also really bad at remembering these long strings of characters and numbers and stuff like that. We're better off remembering things like seed phrases. So if you can get your, if you do, get your users into the concept of having a seed phrase, for example, it'll be usually it's like 3 common words or whatever that are strung together. It's actually incredibly difficult to attack that as long as that's unique globally. A computer can't attack that because it ends up being this 20 character long passwords usually, because you got three of those words in it, and the user's going to remember it really, really easily. So I've got one that was given to me, client work that I need to do, and it's got it's very easy for me to remember those 3 words. I put those 3 in. There's different capitalization requirements and things like that.
You have to vary it up. That's
exactly.
You have to space it with numbers, because otherwise, any dictionary, any language, like where there's only 10,000 words in the English language. So if you use a 4-phrase, a dictionary attack is only going 10,000, or what is it, 10 to the 4th, or 10,000 to the 4th is, or 10 factorial to the 4th. Something like that.
The key, and this is, by the way, the real key to this is it has to be globally unique. In today's world, if your password is not unique across the globe, you're at risk, because not everybody's aware of the way that most passwords work. But what happens is there's the computer is storing a hash. Okay. The hash value itself of your password is non-reversible. I can't take a hash value and go back and tell you what the password was unless that's a known hash that's out there. And guess what? There's 877 million known hashes stored in dark web databases. These are the passwords like password 123. These are your old Facebook password that you're using back in 2007 or something like that. These are things that have been hacked over the years and have been stolen out of these databases when people are using poor password hygiene or not properly salting the hashes and things like that. And they take that and they dump those in there, and those are the types of things that are used for the dictionary attacks. They'll just start with those 877 million known hashes because they're known, and they say, okay, this guy's password is Q-wordy, right? And that password hash is in every single dictionary attack that's out there. So if you get a hold of somebody's hashes, which is not actually that challenging, especially with cache credentials, you can then compare that hash to those 877 million. And if it's not globally unique, you're in trouble. Now, the 3 words, like you said, if you add a number on the end of it and stuff, it's extremely unlikely that that's going to be used anywhere. And that's going to be a very long one. So to try to do a brute force attack against it is going to take the age of the universe, essentially. And so that's why, it's recommended to make sure that you have a globally unique password. And by the way, that can be challenging in and of itself. You have to have a trusted site to do that. And there's a few kind of like white hat hacker sites that like haveabeenpwned.com. Yeah, we've all used that.
Here's my password. Is anybody else using it?
I know.
Well, 3 people are now.
What I tell people is, be sure you know what you're doing, and also throw in an old password in there, one that you don't use anymore, right? Or at a minimum, if you really don't trust it, at least throw in your email address, because the email address is used as the username, and it'll tell you if it was part of a hack. And then you'll see, oh, okay, my email address was hacked out of this and this and this and this. And that gives you an idea, by the way, first off, where the scammers get your information from, to be able to target you directly. And also, you tell yourself, I'm not going to use that service anymore because these guys are idiots and they allowed my information to get out into the wild. So, yeah. I'm speaking as somebody, by the way, with a Hotmail email address that I still use. So,
yeah, same here.
Yeah, and I mean, that's part of it. I could throw that one in there. You can throw it in yourself if you want. You can see how many hacks that's part of.
Chrome has actually been pretty proactive at telling you whenever your identity or your passwords.
Yeah, they make it in now. I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
If you're reusing cool passwords, they tell you, hey, your information, maybe not with that user ID, but that password that we have stored for you is now is part of a breach. You should go change that.
And I do recommend password management tools. There's quite a few that are out there. I've been using LastPass. It's pretty good in terms of cross-platform support. There's open source ones, KeepPass, if you're really paranoid. I mean, those are great too, because they will also do the same thing. They'll go and they'll tell you, hey, you're reusing passwords on these sites, and you probably shouldn't do that. That's not good practice. Reusing passwords not a good idea. Certainly, again, you're not going to remember all 800 passwords across all these different sites that you have. That's where the password management tool comes into place. But anyway, I always think of, I don't know if you guys, Douglas Adams, who read The Hitchhiker.
Oh,
yeah. Okay. So there's a point in Hitchhiker's Guide, one of the, I think it's like,
don't worry, I will tell you,
at the end of the
3
universe.
bars.
Okay. So there's at one point they're talking about all these different ways of authenticating a person, like they were using blood and they're using this. And so to make things simpler, they made like a card that would include all that information. It would have your fingerprint, it would have your blood type, it would have everything in it. And then of course that was how they would hack you, is they would use, they'd steal that card and, they'd think, oh, we're so smart, we're using all these biometrics, but they built all the biometrics into the card. And I'm paraphrasing exactly what happened, but I always think of that kind of that I need to go back and read the series again. I just got it back from my nephew. He borrowed it for like a year. So
the audiobook and the various radio versions are also priceless and have a variety of different takes on each of the stories.
Douglas Adams, awesome.
One of the things that's bothered me in recent times is with the shift to the cloud, I keep having this conversation of it's not our problem anymore. Right? Where the client says, yeah, well, we're moving everything to the cloud, so that's not our problem anymore. But that's not true for security. In fact, it's the opposite when it comes to security, isn't it? It's most definitely still your problem.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, we see those kind of things, those kind of cloud mistakes all the time. California DMV, bless their hearts, one of the most inefficient organizations I've ever had to deal with. And I'm sure a lot of DMVs are like this, but they went out on some AWS instance. They had a database with like everybody's driver's license numbers, all their personal information, and it was just public. And it was like that for 2 months. And a journalist or something was like, why was I able to go in and look at all that information without being prompted for any type of authentication or anything? And turned out it was some vendor that was working with the DMV, and you know how these things work. Right. But man, for like 2 months, everybody's information was out there. So you want to look up my driver's license info? It's probably on the dark web database somewhere.
Another term that I was trying to coin back in the early 2000s was threat index. The more popular your company is, the more likely you are to be a target. It's scaled with, the however much people think there is to gain by breaching you. And I would assume that if you're a security speaker, that you are targeted more often. I think the LifeLock guy that published his social security number has something like 10 million credit cards out there on things that don't go through and verify, where he expected it to do that. But if you're a small fish that's not normally a target, when you put your data into one of the big fish bowls like AWS, you're actually increasing your likelihood of a breach, because your data is out there in a more highly attacked area. Yeah. So I would say that that has to be entered into the conversation when you're looking at going in cloud, that you have to have large company scale security practices to match the fact that you're putting yourself into shark infested waters.
Yeah, I mean, it really is, the amount, you have to pretty much assume that when you are entering in some PID into a site, that has a good chance of escaping that site, right? No matter how big the organization is. In fact, sometimes it's the biggest organizations that have these kind of breaches. So you do have to be cautious with that. It's of course we're all, it's very convenient. We've got these services that are out there. I probably paid for the space flight that Bezos took, with all the Amazon purchases that we make in our house, especially through the pandemic. But, those services are very convenient, but they've got this information about you and it's being stored in a database, and we all know how that works. And sure, there are things we can do. We can, have encryption keys on the databases, but who controls the keys? And does that guy get compromised? And if he gets compromised, the Twitter thing was nuts. If you read into how they got hacked, they went across like air gap, they hacked the first part of it, and then they went in through the air gap and hacked the second part, and they got, and then they tweeted, and it was kind of silly too at the end of the day, because they made almost no money off of it, the hackers, but the reputation hit that Twitter got after that was huge. So it made you wonder what the real incentives were, is like someone trying to take Twitter down a few notches there. But yeah, when you're making it through air gaps, it's pretty impressive that, but these guys are, professional hackers. They're being paid to do that. And they, sometimes even get commissions based on how much they make. So there's a lot of incentive for them to get at your wallet and get your data. So,
do you think the social hacks are what need are the biggest now versus technical hacks?
I didn't catch all of that. I think your audio was coming in a little.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was asking if you think the. Let me make sure I've got the right microphone on. I do. Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you think the social hacks are the biggest surface now, as opposed to the technical surface, the scraping and botnetting versus scraping and bombing people and trying to get people to do the work for you?
Yeah, I'm certainly the social attacks are becoming a bigger and bigger chunk of this, and it's also the type of information you can glean out of someone's social media accounts is first off, privacy out the window. You want to talk about that. We've been talking about this for years as well too. It's one of the reasons why many years ago, like I even brought down a lot of my social media presences. Certainly when it comes to, family and things like that, it's you can scrape a ton of information about a person and their habits and what they're doing. I mean, people, the fact that you used to be able to, people would, the GPS is on our phones, for example. And, you would go in, and I remember in the early days, it was like, oh, now you can share your location through Facebook Messenger. Why don't we, why don't you set it to share your location all the time? And then that information ends up in a database. That information of, oh, in the morning, you're going to drop your kid off at daycare at this location, and then you're going to here, and then you're going to here. And even when that data is anonymized, right? So it's not your name, but it's just like a GUID used for you. You can still pretty much figure out who that person is, because guess what? That person leaves this address, and I know that Eric lives at this address. So really not that hard to piece that kind of stuff together, and you've just given people can literally buy that information as they resell the information. Some of these dodgy apps in particular, hey, turn on your location services, and now we're going to resell every place that you've been, and we're going to sell those to, in theory, it's people that want to target the ads, or they know that you're going to this gym, and so blah blah blah. But in practice, then if I have enough money, I can buy that, and I can get tons of information about where you go, what you do, stuff that can be used to blackmail you. I don't know what you're doing. The report that was talking about, there was this one anonymous GUID that was visiting all of these hotels only for like 2 hours at a time, or motels, I should say. Yeah, okay. But, maybe he was a motel repairman. I don't know.
That's it. TV repairman, no doubt.
TV repairman.
They call that when you're merging together anonymized information. I think I heard that term called rehydration. When you're reversing the scrubbing of it by using other factors to join it back to, well, if we know the IP address and the traffic, and from this other sort we have the name and the IP address, well then, we have both of those, and we've rebuilt that record, even though you tried to take it out.
Exactly.
So one thing, Michael, that never ceases to amaze me is that we know from being in the business that it's not if you're going to get hacked, it's when.
Yeah.
As a company of any significant size, right, you have to assume that you're going to get breached. And it never ceases to amaze me how organizations continue to respond like they never thought this could ever happen to them. Like, oh no, we've been hacked. Now what do we do? And it's this gigantic fire drill. Whereas protection is one thing, right? Doing all the things on the front end, but you have to have a plan to deal with it when it happens. And I keep coming across people who have no plan for dealing with what happens after the fact.
Yeah, and in IT in particular, we're so used, the levels, the IT admins used to being God, and they want to be God all the time. And that's all great when you're in control of your accounts, right? When that IT admin, especially a lower level one, because you have 42 domain admins in your domain, right? When that lower level domain admin account gets hacked because, there's cache credentials on a machine or whatever, and then that person goes and ransomwares the entire all domain join systems, that's when you realize, oh, gee, maybe we shouldn't, we should have a better process in place for not necessarily having everybody being admin by default or the IT admins by default. So, that's where it's like elevation of privileges comes into place. And again, there's tools, things to talk about during my session in Frankfurt and in other places. But, these kind of tools can help you to temporarily elevate your privileges, as opposed to being the god all the time until that day when your credentials are compromised and that god takes over your environment, and that's when it's a real mess. So there's no plan in place for these things, and people are running around with traditional practices. We get clients all the time, and I almost want to tell them, they say, okay, here's your admin credentials. I'm like, you don't have MFA on that? Come on, you turn MFA on at a minimum. You've got to have MFA on, because username and password just doesn't cut it nowadays. Sure, I'm not going to reuse a password with you guys, but who the next contractor might, right?
I think there's still a huge knowledge gap in IT that I've spent weeks arguing with a senior compliance officer for IT security that the password checkout system that they put in place protected us from accounts getting compromised. And so if an admin account, if somebody gets the admin account password, you have we have the ability to change it with our tool because we have the password. Well, but if they get the password, they have the ability to change the password to something else.
Yeah, exactly.
We have password self-service at the same time, and we actually require people to do this. We just put in 3 new systems that force you to do that. Having the old one doesn't help you at all.
Yeah.
And weeks could not explain that, couldn't get that through.
And that it can work against you too, because the IT gets, oh, we're protected because of this. And so then you become blinded to all the other threats that are out there. That's exactly how you eventually get compromised. I read, I talk about these case scenarios, and I'm not trying to pick on any one organization and stuff, but it's fascinating to go back and read through some of these more famous hacks, especially years later when they publicize exactly how they took place. What was it? RSA, when they got hacked, this was over a decade ago. But if you read into exactly what happened, there was also an air gap that was crossed in that case, and to get to that point to where they lost their root keys, which is that basically are used to generate all those secure IDs. They basically had to go back to all their clients and reissue every single physical secure ID after the case, and that's you never want to be in that position. So but yeah, there's a whole analysis they finally publicized years later, and so go into it if you really want a good read to see exactly. And that was, by the way, that was with technology 10 years ago. So where the hackers are right now have gotten a lot more sophisticated.
There was a big one 2 or 3 years ago, more recently, that I also don't want to name, but that had to go through pretty much the same thing.
These are all public, right?
Yeah, they are public. I don't need to share. And
I know. Yeah,
dirty laundries.
I don't know. If they can come and sue me, I guess, right? Everybody, how many people watch this podcast?
Well, a lot. We don't.
Counting you too.
No, I'm good.
Part of the problem too is that security mechanisms aren't universal across a tool chain. So, for example, if you implement multi-factor authentication on your Azure AD accounts, that's great, nice step. But then you try and implement a tool, like if you want to do migrations from SharePoint, from one to another. Well, under a very wide range of circumstances, the MFA isn't supported at all.
Yeah.
Right. So the tool chain doesn't support the very mechanisms, partly because the mechanisms themselves were never designed to be supported by third parties. Right. So they'll rush to put in something that's part of their closed loop system. Right. There's no ubiquitous MFA methodology between Microsoft and Google and Amazon and all the other identity providers out there with a universal set of plugins and known ways that you can work securely with those mechanisms. So it's a mishmash. So as a company, especially if you're a CTO trying to fit these pieces together, it can be almost impossible to make all these pieces work.
Yeah. And I mean, you do hit on a couple of good points. And the other thing to note, even though of course I strongly do recommend MFA, MFA by itself, as opposed to no MFA, certainly is much more secure. But even MFA has its own, let's say, its own challenges. One of the things I've noticed, one of the new things that the hackers will do, is they'll find a way to get it to where they have the knowledge of when you're making an MFA request, and they'll time their hack for right at that exact moment. So you're expecting the MFA prompt to come across, and they time it, like they're like, okay, let's try to hit right in front of it, and you click accept on that, right? Mm-hmm. And then they've gotten past that. They've gotten past your MFA. So Microsoft's trying to, like, for example, internally, they're trying to get more sophisticated. You may have seen that, where they send you a number instead, and then they'll say, for example, where the authentication prompt came from, like which IP, which country it comes from. So they're trying to get a little bit better around that. But yes, this is, it's all great if you're 100% in the, Azure AD bubble, but nobody is. Everybody's got, other systems that they support, or they're using Okta, or they're using some, Ping, or different identity providers. They all have their own ways of doing things. You get this mishmash. There's no one solution for this. And there's always the exceptions. As you mentioned, you've got the service account that just so happens to be, a SharePoint admin because it needs to move stuff from one place to the next. Well, now we're only as secure as that username and password. Mm-hmm. So you better have some well-controlled password, policy that not only, has an unbreakable password, but the ability for someone to access that has to be very, very well controlled. So yeah, it's a huge challenge, and it's going to continue to be a problem. It'll probably even get worse.
Which in those situations hinders our ability to get work done, right? That we're trying to accomplish. So there's always this tug of war between, there's work that's got to be done, efficiency and security, right, and productivity, and they're always fighting each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's kind of like, you don't want to be, if you put on the CISO hat, if you put on like the security hat, you're coming in and everybody's like, this guy's always stopping us from trying to be productive and trying to do our work. And, maybe there's a little bit of truth to that. We're trying to make it, sure. But at the same time, it'll be a screeching halt if the cybersecurity is not there and everything is just leveled and you have to restore, like, your Sony Pictures type of scenario. I mean, again, if you look into, again, not trying to pick on any one organization, but when they got taken out, they took out everything. I mean, they leveled it. They had to rebuild their 84s. They had to rebuild absolutely everything from scratch just because they just took out backups. They took out everything. So, you don't want to be in that situation. So there's this trade-off, security, functionality, the ability to do my job. And Microsoft's getting better about that. But yeah, in early days of MFA, for example, nothing would work across that. You can do PowerShell, you can do all this stuff. It's getting better, right? You can now have a PowerShell, and you can MFA from it, and it's a little bit of a better situation than it was before. But the worst case scenario is when it's malfunctioning, your MFA is not working right, the Office client keeps prompting the user, for that MFA. And then at that point, it just becomes the user just starts hitting accept. And that's not what we want them to do. We want them to do that like once every 3 months or something at most. You don't want them to keep on having to be prompted.
That's your control. And you can't have it be.
And that's the thing. It's kind of silly too. People talk about that. Oh, we want the session cookie to be, it'll be expiring, like we want it to expire in 6 hours. I'm like, why? No, you can have like an Office 365 session that can have that go for 3 months, or I think even longer if you want to. There's no reason why you want to expire those necessarily sooner, because when you expire them, you're forcing that user to have to re-authenticate again, and it just becomes practice for them. I'm just going to keep on clicking on things. So, yeah, security is always excessive until it's not enough. You're right. And then you're looking for a new job.
Yeah.
So how do you, when you're working with clients, how do you, one, get them to understand that trade-off and implement it, and two, give it enough attention but not go completely overboard to the point they can't get anything done?
Yeah, it's a tough one. A lot of it is finding the fertile ground, right? The people that are going to actually understand the risk. I think it's more and more people are understanding the risk, but the most successful cases when we've really implemented proper security controls and things like that are when the CXO level is is really serious about listening in on this, and they provide the backup to come in and say, yes, we need this. Oftentimes, and I'm sure you guys deal with this, it starts with the highest security clients, your defense contractors, things like that. But it's also, we do a lot of work with pharmaceuticals and things like that. They have such serious controls in place that there really needs to be an auditable set of security and all these other requirements. So oftentimes that's when we get the best support, is that management is coming down and saying, you must do this. You guys must all enable, turn on MFA. I don't want to hear complaints about it. Yes, let's work around these workarounds. Let's figure out ways to do these kind of things. But there has to be that kind of like CXO level approval of things. Otherwise, if at that level they just are like, no, don't interfere, let's let our users do things, you're gonna get hit. You're gonna get hit hard at some point. And then when the board of directors kills the executive level and replaces them with people that do understand that, then that's when as the IT people coming in, you can implement the proper controls. But IT should certainly be ready to fight those battles, and get it in paperwork if they say, oh, we're going to ignore this. I've told you this threat is here. I'm sending you an email now saying we know that threat is there, but we're willing to proceed forward because I don't want it to be, it's a little CYA for us. Quantum computing. Yeah, this is an interesting one. So, quantum computing, listen, I mean, there's Moore's law, right? I mean, the silicon itself is, of course, it's getting faster and faster and faster. And their ability to do things like break SHA-1 encryption, hashing and things like that. Sure, we can do things now that we couldn't do before. And in the future with quantum computing, we can do things that we couldn't necessarily do before either. However, some of the strongest, like the SHA-256 stuff, I've even seen some estimates on that, is it would take a quantum computer running with the power of the sun and running, and I forget for how many years, but it was a very long time to even crack, to reverse engineer, let's say, like a SHA-256 hash. So yeah, I'm not too concerned about quantum computing. I think it will change things, and it will deprecate some of the older stuff that's out there. Just like today, we look at an old SHA-1 keyed PKI hierarchy, and we need to rekey it with SHA-2 because it's just not up to snuff against modern attacks. And people that have enough resources will be able to come in and start to decrypt things in the future. But I think modern day, what we're using right now with the latest in certificates, we're okay for the good length of certificates that we should have in place. And by the way, that's a reason why you shouldn't be able to get a 20-year certificate on your web server, because who knows where the decryption capabilities are going to be even 15 years from now. That's why when you buy a web cert, at least from a good known company, it's going to be 3 years or 5 years at the most.
In case people can't see, and this was a wrong comment that I got, I won't say where, somebody saying that quantum computing was going to end password internet and encryption as we know it, and the internet will die because of quantum computing. And it's like, it's a secret talk. As soon as the threat from quantum computing, we'll use quantum computing to defend against it. It's not like that. It's a technology that will only ever be in one set of hands, and we won't be able to. We'll have stronger and stronger certs, and there won't be that. I'm looking forward to the bus power. Granted, I did experimentally have my loft crack and rainbow tables generated. I've still got some burned CDs with rainbow tables and stuff there, and that's all possible. I think people just didn't understand it and maybe get a little bit more of it. Now, it's more to worry about.
So, I mean, I got bits and pieces of that. I think we're having some kind of audio issue there, but I will say, and I think we're also running out of time here. Yes, agreed. As the tools for offense increase in sophistication, the tools for defense also increase in sophistication. Again, that's the kind of thing that I'll be talking about during that session. And I'll leave by saying, cryptography is a fascinating area. You want to talk about the offense and defense of it. I read a really good book on it. It was written a while ago, surprisingly, but it's still very relevant, but it's called The Code Book by Simon Singh, Singh. Fantastic book if you really want to dive into that. Look kind of the history of cryptography from like ancient Egypt all the way through PGP, basically. It kind of gives you an idea of where we've gotten and how difficult it is to reverse engineer the modern encryption, like kind of when we got to that level. But yet all the times in history that they thought that this is an unbeatable encryption, think like World War II, right? Enigma machines. Right. And they cracked those. They were cracking them, right? You talk about going up to UK to that event. That's where they cracked it, right?
Yeah, indeed so. Yeah.
Yeah. Any case, I don't want to go too long with you guys. I think
we're so once again, we get rolling and we suddenly realize that we're out of time, as always happens when we.
I just want to have 30 more of these, or this podcast could be security only, and I would be happy.
Nice. Yeah.
So, of course, we want to thank Michael for joining us this month. And if you want to hear more about this and pick Michael's brain, please come and join us in Germany at the European Collaboration Summit event, which is collabsummit.eu. So you go sign up for that. And contrary to what some people think, we absolutely do not mind answering questions before and after events. Usually our only requirement is to show up with a beverage of our choice in your hand, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. Understanding that there's a window, right? When we have too many of those in our answers, the quality of our answers goes off a cliff. But
a little more experimental at that point. We get into some areas you don't always.
We start theorizing.
Exactly.
Want to thank our sponsors, as always, for making this happen. Aptigent, the bifocal show, and the local Dallas Salesforce developer group. I believe your meeting is tomorrow, is it not? Or,
no, next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. Indeed so. And so we want to thank those sponsors, and we will see all of you next month. Again, just a final reminder, if you do have questions, please put them onto the various channels, either Facebook or YouTube. Put comments in there. We will route those to Michael so he can answer questions for you and get them back to you. Of course, you can find Michael on all the social channels for the most part, the Facebooks and the LinkedIns and whatnot. I'm sure he wouldn't mind if you reach out with some pithy questions around security, and especially if your organization might need some help. He'd love to talk to you. Paul, thanks for joining me this month. Good to see you, and we will see all of you next month.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.